Debra Banks received a frantic call from her future son-in-law, Keyon Pittman. He was driving home from work, and he asked her if she'd heard from her daughter, Avis. He told her that they needed to get over to his house right away. She asked him what was wrong and where Avis was. He just repeated himself, and then he hung up the phone. And he wouldn't tell them what was wrong, so they got in their car and drove to Keyon and Avis's house, which was 55 miles away in Ridgeland, Mississippi, which is north of Jackson. Her parents thought that she'd probably had a miscarriage. Obviously, a miscarriage would be horrible news, but they knew that Avis and Keyon would get through it and they could try again when they were ready. As her father, Fred Banks, turned into the subdivision where Avis and Keyon lived, he expected to see the Christmas lights that he'd helped Keyon put on the roof, but he saw yellow tape instead, and he knew it was bad. They didn't have to say it, they didn't have to tell him. And Avis's mother said that she's never felt the way she did that day, and the pain was indescribable. When they got closer, they learned that the back door had been kicked in and that a burglary had been staged. Some rooms had been ransacked and drawers were pulled open, but nothing was stolen, and someone had broken into the garage and waited for Avis to come home. She had been ambushed. She had been shot, stabbed, and her throat had been slashed. And she was 27 years old, and she and Keyon's wedding date was only about 3 months away. Avis Marie Banks was born in 1979, and she came from a very respectable family. Her father was a street sweeper, and her mother, Debra, babysat in their home. Her father made sure to check out the boys that came to visit his 3 daughters, and after he was done laying down the law, only a few of them would return. And Avis worked at a daycare, and she was the first of her siblings to graduate college. She studied early childhood development, and she graduated cum laude. She had dreams to one day open up her own daycare. When she got pregnant, her dad said that she asked them for forgiveness because the baby was conceived out of wedlock. But Avis said that she was going to make things right by getting married. And before she was killed, the whole family was excited about celebrating Christmas at the couple's new home in just a few weeks. Keyon Pittman was college educated, he was well-mannered, and he was hard-working. He was a type of guy that Avis's father thought was a keeper. He was the son that they never had. He was also a basketball coach and a math teacher at Chastain Middle School in Jackson, Mississippi. He also moonlighted as a bartender. Carla Hughes was born in 1981, and she was adopted by her uncle Carl and her aunt Lynda when she was just 6 years old because her mother already had more kids than she could support. Growing up, she was involved in a lot of different types of extracurricular activities. She was in beauty pageants, she excelled at horseback riding, she was a majorette, a cheerleader, an honor student, and a page in the Mississippi State Senate. A few years before she met Keyon, Carla thought that she had met the man of her dreams, but right before the wedding, her fiance called it off. And she was then left single and 2 months pregnant, and in 2004, she gave birth to a son. Carla started working at Chastain Middle School in 2006, and she was also a cheerleading coach. She had a master's degree in education, and she was set to receive her education specialist degree. Her next goal was to start working towards a doctorate. On the afternoon of November 29th in 2006, Keyon dropped off some groceries at Carla's house to keep them cool in her refrigerator while he was at basketball practice. He spoke to Avis at 5:12 and then 5:36 when she was driving home from work. After practice, he went back to Carla's apartment to pick up the groceries, and he noticed that Carla was unusually quiet. He stayed there for 20 to 30 minutes and he left about 8:30. When he got home, he pulled into the garage using the garage door opener, and he saw Avis lying on the garage floor next to her car. He ran into the garage and he tried to wake her, but she didn't respond. And investigators found out that Keyon usually entered the house through the front door, but on the night of the murder, he went in through the garage. He checked the house to see if anybody was in there, and then he ran next door where a neighbor called 911 for him, even though he had his cell phone with him. When police arrived, he was in the garage holding Avis's body, and the police ordered him to step away from her, and then they started to search the house. The police investigation concluded that Avis had arrived home between 5:50 and 6 o'clock that evening, and that she had been killed shortly after. 3 of the 4 gunshot wounds were fatal. The stab wounds weren't fatal, and they may have occurred post-mortem. All of the bullets were from a .38 caliber weapon. Avis was in her second trimester and she was having a baby boy. Once Keyon discovered Avis's body, he called Carla before he asked the neighbor to call 911 for him. And Carla was on the phone with her mother at the time. So she clicks back over and she tells her mother that someone had just killed Keyon's wife. Her mother said Keyon needs to call the police instead of being on the phone with her. He also admitted to calling another woman because he was upset and he needed some consolation. He was starting to get close to the mother of one of the basketball players that he coached. But the woman denied a relationship, but she had an alibi anyway. Keyon started seeing Carla 1 month after finding out that Avis was pregnant, and they met frequently at Carla's apartment. They would go out of town together, but he insisted that the relationship was completely physical and that there was never a long-term plan with Carla, and even their co-workers knew about them. Keyon testified that Avis didn't know about Carla. Carla says that Avis did know about her. Carla was so serious about their relationship that she referred to Keyon as her future husband when they were around her friends and her family. Because of that, she was extremely unhappy that Keyon wasn't going to leave Avis for her. On one occasion, she had started to drive to their house to tell Avis about the affair, but Keyon stopped her by threatening to call the police. She knew where they lived because she had been there 3 times before, and Keyon even had a key to her apartment. The Saturday after Thanksgiving in 2006, Keyon and Avis were visiting her family. That same day, Keyon met Carla at a hotel. Evidence showed that Carla was in possession of the gun that was used to shoot Avis, and cell tower data placed her in the vicinity of the shooting the night that it occurred. That particular cell tower had a 2-mile radius. 2 shoe prints were on the outside of the glass door where someone had kicked it in. 5 bullets were found at the crime scene, and 4 were still in Avis's body, and 1 was on the garage door. The slugs that were extracted from Avis's body matched the gun. A single particle of gunshot residue was found on Keyon's hands, and he had some blood stains on his clothing, but police concluded that it was from him cradling Avis, not from him firing a gun. Keyon was initially a suspect, since the first person closest to the victim is usually the first person that they look at, but he was really upset about that. He didn't have any problem showing anger, but he didn't display any other emotion. On video, what you see is a man that doesn't seem to care that his fiancée is dead. And Keyon had an alibi. He was at basketball practice. Plus, cell phone records put him there because he was texting yet another woman. During questioning, Carla kept getting phone calls, and at one point she was sad about her friend losing his wife. But a few minutes later, she was smiling and laughing. Initially, she denied the affair, as well as having access to a gun, but later that evening she admitted to the affair, but she denied having anything to do with the murder. Shortly after the crime, there was a break in the case when Carla's cousin, Patrick Nash, told police that 3 days before the crime, he had given her a gun and a knife because of an attempted break-in at her apartment. When she picked it up, it was fully loaded, but she returned it after the police interview, and it was now empty. When asked where all the bullets were, she said that she had gone target shooting, and her cousin also said that when she returned the gun, she was crying. Carla's mother mentioned that she was helping inmates at the county detention center to read while she was incarcerated there, and that she had also started a Bible reading session. During trial, Keyon admitted to having an affair with Carla and giving her the impression that she was special to him. The apartment manager testified that Carla had reported an attempted break-in, and prosecutors were able to prove that Carla's cousin's gun was the murder weapon and that it was Carla's shoes that kicked in the door. The prints matched a pair of size 10 shoes that were found in Carla's closet, and they had Avis's blood on them. Keyon admitted to sometimes wearing Carla's shoes. The DA said that Carla wanted the life that Avis had, and the only way she could get it was by killing Avis and her unborn child. All of the defense witnesses said that they've never known Carla to be violent and she was always a peacemaker. But good people do bad things. The assistant DA said that Avis wasn't met by a peacemaker that night, but rather a stone-cold killer. Johnny Walls, Carla's attorney, said that Carla wasn't just a client, but a friend that he'd known her entire life, and at one point he choked up as he spoke to the jury. In his closing statements, he said, "If you decide to kill her, there's nothing you can do to bring her back. And if you later determine that someone else committed this crime, you won't be able to correct that." In 2008, after more than 8 hours of deliberation over 2 days, Carla was found guilty on 2 counts of capital murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In Mississippi, murdering a pregnant woman is considered a double homicide. Avis's mother said that once she heard the guilty verdict, she said a shadow came from her body and then she could breathe again. One of the issues with the case was that Carla's lawyer was experienced in tobacco litigation, and the majority of his experience was in civil law, not criminal law or capital murder cases. By 2007, Keyon had gotten married and he moved out of the state. He and his wife, Krystal, live in Detroit, and they own a holistic health store in Pontiac, Michigan, and it's called the Herbal Touch. In 2016, a go-get funding account was set up by Carla's mother. She thinks that Carla was framed. And Carla is serving out her sentence at Central Mississippi Correctional Institution. And Carla's parents raised her son.